Good morning, everyone. We're so glad that you can join us here for our last of our series of Sunday forums on stewardship here at Christ the King Lutheran Church. Our stewardship season, as you know, has been called Hope Rising. It's the stewardship season for 2024. And so the last of our forums, we will have Mr. Daniel Zorn, who will be helping us understand how does our strategic plan align with our stewardship. And the stewardship that we have here at Christ the King and through Christ the King. So I think without further ado, I'm going to invite Mr. Daniel Zorn, please lead us in this wonderful discussion.
Thank you, Pastor. Good morning. If I've yet to meet you personally, my name is Daniel Zorn, and as you probably have heard or know, there are two things that I like to talk a lot about. And one is my collection of nativities and the Christmas Festival, which is happening here in this very room in a few weeks. And so we have some fans, I appreciate that. And the second is talk about strategic planning, and especially the plan that this congregation approved last year, June of 2022, which takes us to our 80th anniversary as a congregation in 2025. This morning I was asked to discuss how does our strategic plan guide the work of this congregation in stewarding our time, talent, and treasures. Who has seen the congregation's strategic plan? How would you describe it?
Short.
The word?
Well-rounded.
Well-rounded.
Short but dense.
Short but dense. Like a teapot, short and stout. Has anyone thought of our strategic plan as a stewardship guide? Kind of an interesting thought to kind of give through it as you go through it. And as I took and reviewed it, how I would probably say every line is some kind of expression of stewardship. Stewardship is defined how? When you hear the word stewardship, how do you define it?
Giving your time, talent, and treasure in the pursuit of the mission of the church.
Count the treasures in order to pursue what is the purpose of the church, right? Purpose of the congregation.
And taking care of all
Taking
of those
care.
things.
All those things. That's kind of a round the clock task, right? That's why we have different kind of committees and different groups, whether it be altar guild, ushers, choir, teachers, those kind of things, right?
And stewardship's always future and forward thinking, because we're shaping the direction of everything going forward.
And it can be very forward thinking, be about shaping what is for the future, planning that, planting seeds, if you will. So stewardship is the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. Careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. What are some examples in our daily lives of something entrusted to our care?
Pets.
Okay. Children,
Family, yeah.
family,
The local environment.
environment, right? Care for our environment. Where's a lot is something that we take on, right? And sometimes it's burdensome. There's a lot of pressure or stress, right? And how we get through that is accomplished in very different kinds of ways. You get through that in terms of planning, budgeting, time management, making a list, all things that are your careful management, your responsible management of something that's been entrusted to you. Luther had a lot to say about stewardship. And if you kind of dive into his different writings and works, there are, I think, at least 2 of the 95 theses that he nailed on the castle door that addressed that. A lot was going on in terms of, as I kind of put it, we're to give to those in need and are to provide for our families before throwing away money after modern equivalent of indulgences. So it kind of goes to that whole thing of some people will take and say charity begins at home, but we are entrusted to take care of ourselves and our family and others before we start to take and, in this sense, throw away something into modern indulgences. For Luther, the gospel was primary, vocation was holy, and stewardship was an integral part of Christians' life on earth. As thankful recipients of this amazing grace, and as part of our vocation calling in this world, we are to practice good stewardship of our time, talent, and treasures. So how does our strategic plan seek to ignite the stewardship of that, our time, our talent, our treasures, and possessions? What I provided to you is an abbreviated copy of the strategic plan. It's front and back, and this will help kind of guide our discussion throughout the remainder of our time together in terms of identifying in the plan how it is a stewardship document and how it's to guide our stewardship. So you see that I've provided the missions and vision statements. And in that, I can pull out just in that statement something that is about stewardship. And I think so can you. Mine hits me right in the face when we talk about us being an inclusive community. That every act is not only thinking about ourselves, but about others and bringing others in and creating an environment in which we welcome and not only greet them with a smile and a handshake and the little this, but how we also take and create an environment that is open for them, accepting, that it is thinking about things that might be reasons for being nervous. So example of, simple rubrics in our service bulletin, those things in red italics that kind of lead. We're going to stand, we're going to sit, so you don't have to be looking around. What do I do? Signage of where do I go on this campus? Where do I park? Where the restroom is? Is it something that is accessible for me? Inclusivity. What else in that statement kind of speaks to stewardship? Perhaps it is that we're committed to God's mission of love and service. That directs it that is especially to the oppressed and to the poor. And for those that are wonderful individuals regarding grammar, you will argue that that last part of the sentence is incorrect. And that is intentional. So in my facilitation of the strategic planning team, they wanted to flip that phrase. We're used to hearing the poor and oppressed, but it was flipped. And there are extra words in it that don't make it necessarily grammatically correct. You would get a red mark on your paper when you turned it in. But you don't have to be poor to be oppressed. Right. And so they wanted to separate that. And so therefore, the team will be sticklers when they see it changed or rewritten, hopefully, and say, we really want to take and separate that out. And this came about through conversations within you and others, your other congregants, is that we looked at that statement and what was going to be final. It was, yes, we acknowledge the poor. We acknowledge that perhaps they are also oppressed. but we also recognize that everyone can feel oppressed and not have some kind of economic impact. Think of what has gone on in the last couple of years in terms of changes and decisions that have made people feel oppressed. In the vision statement, I come to the idea of partnering with others to transform lives as a stewardship document. That is the future book, right? As you said, Rachel, that is partnering with others, stewarding relationships, building relationships between ourselves and with the outside community, be it our neighbors, be it other Lutherans, be it non-Christians, be it government, be it other nonprofits, others, and transforming lives. Our stewardship is to take and serve others, improve our community, our lives, everyone's lives. Our values and beliefs, this was an interesting process that you may remember, went through a different kind of iteration in which we asked people to take and give us words that described Christ the King Lutheran Church, to take and describe what was their impression, their description of the congregation. And that is how these sentences came to be. And as our internal joke here is that we have, numerous editors, and we value that, right? And so they're carefully crafted in different kinds of sentences to take and meet those overarching things that we found when we asked people to describe our congregation. And I really do take and enjoy going through those because I think it does say a lot about ourselves, but it also takes and identifies also in which how we see ourselves as stewards of God's world, how it sees ourselves as stewards of Christ the King, as stewards of our community. So in the first sentence, called by the Spirit, we honor Christ and God's people with integrity. I find that the word honor is very much a stewardship. That we take and we honor Christ and his people. That is something that we maintain, that we keep up. We're Christ's church that exists not for itself, but for the world. It's outward. The next sentence, I entirely think the whole thing is a stewardship statement. I love it. We desire to worship regularly together so that God's people can be nourished by Christ, develop an emerging individual and collective spiritual identity, and demonstrate the reality of God's presence in our daily lives. Let's break that up a little bit and think in terms of what's being stewarded there. Ideas, thoughts?
God's people can be nourished, is the first thing that pops out to me, and in order to reach people, we have to pour into that.
Okay, so in order for people to be nourished, we have to fill, right? And whether an analogy would be fill a plate, fill a pitcher of water. In order to help someone that's thirsty, we need to provide that. What else?
Worship regularly is
Worship regularly.
like the way we worship involves a lot of people, a lot of time, a lot of planning, a lot of staff.
So the way in which we worship involves a lot of enablers to do that, a lot of time in terms of all different kinds of roles and responsibilities. Gail, tell me what your thoughts are in terms of roles.
And worship.
In worship, to enable worship, to make that service that we just came out of is going into.
The amount of planning that the staff does, week by week, and
Right. So planning by staff.
editing and correcting and hours and hours.
Right.
Do all that. The sermon.
Right. What in addition to the clergy, the staff, ushers.
Got 3 or 4 each service. You got Altar Guild, again,
Altar Guild.
in each service, and Altar Guild does a lot of planning ahead, and we meet monthly, and we order supplies, and I mean.
Right.
There's bell ringers,
The bell ringers.
choir, and hours practice, and planning, and.
Right.
Man, I meant the number, we're wondering to count the hours per week.
Can you imagine the number of hours in a week that go into just putting on that one service, for both services, for the Saturday service, or the 24 services that we have in Advent, right? We heard this morning, there's 24 opportunities for worship during Advent, the month of December.
Taking it one step further, we have now got a very heavy online presence. And so there was a lot that went into making that happen and continuing to make that happen and keeping up with making sure all of the updates are done and staying on top of technology and a new website and our apps.
Right.
Those things.
Right.
It's just, it's like.
So enabling an online presence, which has been fruitful for us, that takes and reaches people, perhaps not just on Sunday, but other days of the week.
Well, that speaks to the daily lives because it goes up on YouTube, so somebody who maybe didn't get to it on Sunday can access it later, or now we've got podcasts that can be accessed, so we just have a very robust presence.
Yes, a robust presence online outside of our physical presence. The next statement is we are centered, challenged, and motivated by Christian teachings and practices as viewed through a Lutheran perspective. And I look at this as a stewardship piece that we have established our identity. We are Lutherans, that is our perspective. This is our, in a sense, this is our product. This is how we express our trust and faith and love in God and share that with others. We honor and utilize rich heritage of sacred music. I think that in itself is a stewardship piece. And especially emphasis on Lutheran music and traditions. That is an identity. So it's a stewarding that identity forward.
Galen, I don't remember if you mentioned the choir, but all of the hours of rehearsal and even for the organists and the people who play the piano and all of that. And if we have the brass choir or if we,
Yes,
whoever,
yes.
we have a guest
So
musician.
so our very rich music tradition here takes a lot of time and talents and efforts. Right? Yes, absolutely. We believe it is more blessed than to receive.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you.
It's better than this one,
Okay.
because I think some of us come here to receive,
So some of us come here to receive.
because you can't pour out an empty cup. So having the opportunity to come and be in fellowship with others and to nurture relationships, to go through the sacrament of word and communion, you know, to have those things, that's a receiving. It's also a giving. It's a reciprocal relationship that happens there. It's not just a one-sided thing. So I think there's a lot of circular motion that happens.
Circle motion, and with circle motion does what?
Like it's energy.
It can,
It's-
right, energy, so the circle can get bigger, the circle can also move around. The great thought that we are receiving and giving at the same time, right?
And that also goes back to the, mission of love and service to the oppressed and to the poor. Sometimes we come in and we're the oppressed, and sometimes we're poor in spirit. So we receive in that capacity. Sometimes we are the givers and we are the overcomers. So we give in that capacity too. We become a blessing.
So in a sense, we kind of have two different hats, we have two different kind of roles sometimes in our lives on what's going on, right? And isn't it wonderful to have a place for that opportunity, for you to come and to share that or support others in that? I think that is a big piece of stewardship, right? We welcome opportunities to serve God as a community and as individuals. We endeavor to know people, affirm their God-given dignity, and introduce them to Jesus Christ through acts of service so that all may grow to spiritual maturity. That is a very strong stewardship statement. The last two pieces are about how we collaborate. These are kind of administrative, if you will, what are ways in which we can determine how we go about building our relationships. We collaborate with individuals, faith communities, and other organizations with shared values. It's identification, and then it's also a way in which we kind of recruit, retain, help to kind of build forward. And the last is taking and characterizing our relationships with others that we are collaborating with by healthy boundaries, good roles and responsibilities, fiscal accountability, shared vision, and clear communications. I think that those things are like, yes, we shake our head, oh, of course, yes, but those are also very difficult pieces to do. And that is also taking effort and time out to take and maintain good communications, clear communications with our partners, between ourselves, to take and share that vision, communicate that vision, hear it many times so we're all perhaps on the same page. Fiscal accountability. We're accountable for how we take and manage that which is the gifts that we give that we also receive. That also brings a lot of discussion and planning and transparency. That is all part of stewardship. That if we are seeking to increase that and have joyous, happy members and partners and participants, it is making sure that they are part of the planning, the part of how things are accomplished, and understanding that. Jill, you were saying?
I was about to say, is when that falls apart, it is we are very quick to fall apart. You know, when we're not having the clear communication and we're not having the planning, and when the people drift away and people don't stop coming, and
It is a 24/7, 365 job of recruitment, retention, stewardship, right? Of making sure that those relationships are maintained, are being met, expectations, discussions. And that was, if you remember in our discussion as a congregation about the strategic plan, it was taking and creating a change. It was opening up, and the way in which the team took and chose to direct itself through it was giving people opportunity for dialogue. An opportunity, whether it be in person, online, one-on-one, in groups, to take and kind of open up the opportunities for people to ask questions, talk, have discussions. That is stewardship. That was, you go, that's also in many people's eyes a change. And something that, you know, to bring back, to look at reestablishing a committee structure, to take and nourish those different groups that Galen talked about, Jill talked about, that take and do all the daily work to take and keep propelling the support that is given to staff through that structure, and helping staff to take on the burden, because all of this is something that we're all in together, right?
I would add, I would be remiss to say that, you know, that we don't do this on our own effort, right? We're Lutherans. We believe that everything comes from God. We are founded in God, right? And I think the best way to think about at least the last points about these relationships, these committees, is these are structures that we have as a church that allows us to hear God's gift of grace anew, allows us to experience it in many and different ways and in many and different kind of tangible expressions of service, of how we grow as in spiritually in small groups or in opportunities like this. I always think of it as, you know, how can we as a church continue to be in tune with the God who is the giver of life, healing, and forgiveness? And I think what I love about this plan is it allows us to put all of what we do in its context, which is we're in this committee because we are allowing for God to work, to continue to work through us in a very, and not in a filtered way, but in a way that everyone can enjoy, specifically the poor and the oppressed, can enjoy of that grace and mercy. And so I would say the movement is always, here's God, God's up there, but also God is here. All of you bring the presence of God to one another. And so that makes it, I think maybe just keeping that in mind is in all of this, it is drenched in God. And that's why I think our first, and I think we'll probably go to this, our first kind of like theme, right, is becoming a spiritual home. Be developing that awareness that we are drenched in God, that God is pouring God's self out, and that we are those vessels for God's gift of grace.
Well, I think we saw two great examples of that recently. One was going through the RIC process. We absolutely adhered to these tenets in that process. And then, forgive me, I don't know your name, but having a young man who is, what, are you not even 20 yet?
I'm 18.
He's 18. He's the head of the stewardship committee at this congregation. And wow, you talk about a change and sending things in a different direction, and also honoring that he has a place at the table and a voice in his faith journey that can inspire and reflect what's happening here.
Anyone else? On the back, as you flip it over, there is the themes that are part of the plan, that are the meat of the plan, right? And in this strategic plan, let's say, this came at a very interesting time that I want to remind people. We were in the middle of a leadership transition. We were also faced with a merger with our Memorial campus, and those stewarding that responsibility designed to be entrusted as a collective with that. And we're also taking and reacting to the results of the global pandemic, in which found us having to kind of rethink our operations, in which we take and re-engage, right? And some things, and many things have changed. And so that took time for us to take and say, what were the important pieces and what we're going to take and move forward. That broke out into those three themes of becoming a spiritual home, implementing technological innovations to expand our reach, and acting justly in support of others and ourselves. And a lot of communication, a lot of discussion came around those three things, and pushback, questions, concerns that we were saying that, or it was more like, are you saying that we're not a spiritual home? And the big word was becoming. And that when you understand that we're becoming a spiritual home, it is morphing. It is changing all the time. It is going to the fact that as people come and go, as the days advance, different kind of things, we can serve different people in different stages of life, but we're always becoming a spiritual home, that we are growing in our spiritual maturity at all different stages, be 3 years old, 30 years old, 300 years old.
So what you're saying, when we say becoming a spiritual home, there is not an end in sight.
Correct.
There will never be a day that we say, We've done it. We have become a spiritual home.
Check that box.
Yeah, right. So that will not happen.
Because that's the
We will always be the home.
And to the point that when that happens is also when we also take in recess, perhaps we cease to exist. Right? So those bullet points there, shared with you under those three categories are things that are where stewardship, where this becomes a stewardship document. And you've seen this document before, and I'm asking for you to kind of give me kind of what jumps out at you. What is perhaps a bullet point under becoming a spiritual home that is something that you can get your nails into and really understand in ways in which you take and want to help succeed?
I think the exploring and determining the definitional use of our physical facility is really, really important.
Explore and determine the definitional use of our physical facilities.
Not just, I mean, certainly in terms of our merger with West Campus, but it goes beyond that.
Correct.
We are thinking about our programming, who we're serving, and becoming a spiritual home to many people while ensuring our own spirituality. We have to think about the space. How are we going to do that in this space? What's the best use? Space is a gift. So how are we going to take it?
A space is a gift. The physical properties, be it here at Rice Boulevard, on Wall Drive, or even out in the ether, right? How are we going to take and determine the best use of that? That's stewardship right there. That is a piece that is there that is always thinking. It's not that we are, okay, we think it is how things change, what takes and changes.
Now, can I just add that in terms of real stewardship, we've been talking about treasure here. We have been remiss in, we have a lot of deferred maintenance of our facilities. And that's not what we want to do. That's not what we want to be. We need to care for our facilities to allow us to do these kinds.
So this is what you're called to care for our environment, is care for our facilities. We can't have a place that's welcoming and safe and a home to take and invite people to, or to shelter people, or to take and provide a space for our outreach, for a place for people to come to if we're not taking and maintaining a maintenance piece. So yes, that is in there, in the sense of being able to make sure that we have maintain our facilities and act on a routine basis to maintain that. Everything from washers and faucets to light bulbs and the ceilings that we can all see, especially those that have little challenges, right? What else are some things that take and jump out in terms of stewardship that is under that section of becoming a spiritual home? There's outward expression. There is ways in which we take to look to engage ourselves, to build community. Something in which we, need to come back to how do we best do that? How do we reach? How do we serve ourselves, those that are currently here, as well as those that are learning about us or need to hear about us? About ways in which we're determining if there are certain fits for us in terms of our outreach. And that's complicated because it's like, well, we want to be in different places, but we can't be everything to everyone. There are limits. And so how we take and manage our investment of time, talents, and treasures helps to gauge what this plan will be accomplished. And the plan takes and opens up an opportunity to say, we're going to explore certain things. And within this period of time, our exploration is going to inform us, is this something that is viable, or is it something that needs to be revisited? Is it something that needs to be kind of tweaked? So it's not necessarily something that we have that's nailed down that says we will do this, but we will explore this, and it's okay to do that. It's putting it front and forward, saying we're putting time and effort into this, and we're determining the best way to do it, the way in which we can do it with our time and talents and treasures. And it's also okay to say we are going to prioritize things differently.
I think of stewardship as investment. One aspect of it is investment. And we've got blues, brews, and good news starting in, and in essence, that's becoming another type of worship service, worship opportunity. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sergio. You know, we've got what, 35, 40 people now coming on a regular basis on a Friday night. And so when you look at that God model, that's being very beautifully expressed there through that. And what appears to be a social gathering is also becoming an opportunity for connection on lots of levels and a spiritual experience on lots of different levels, right? Okay, then I don't know how many are aware, but there's an organization here that uses this facility. They facilitate adoptions for gay couples. And they use this facility as a meeting space. Families are being created, lives are being touched. God's presence is very felt. I mean, they could be doing that at some, you know, co-working session place, you know, but they're doing it here in this sacred space. So there's a sacred stewardship that's happening by allowing the facility to be used by what's happening in this organization. I love it. It's a investment in people.
That's a wonderful point, and something that was a part of the discussion in the strategic planning team was that there are the needs to reach people in various different ways of building connection, building those opportunities, and that bullet point piece, whether it be not only in worship, but also in gathering together and building community. But then it also takes and also highlights something that I think is always a challenge. And some people will laugh and say it's a challenge for Lutherans. And that is tuning our own home, telling stories, as you just told. How many of us knew those two stories? Knew that about blues, brews, and whatever. I'm too old for it. I just look at this part. But to know that there is that vibrant group that is meeting, that is, and what are the outputs? What are the outcomes? We're not good at telling our stories. We're not good at sharing that we are stewarding God's mission in various different ways, and that we're involving people like that. The next piece is always kind of interesting in the sense that it talks about technology, of which we all cringe, including me from time to time, but we also recognize an important piece of technology that Christ the King, and it's a way in which we were stewarding God's mission, the way in which we meet people in various different ways, which has been discussed, from taking and talking about technology that we use here on our campuses, so that it is reliable, so that it is accessible, but also take and be able to take and utilize different platforms and be able to do our outreach. Everything from having this session that is posted in our website, we're doing kinds of ways in which we communicate within groups and things like that, looking at different kinds of means in which, you know, we take and invest in those opportunities to take and raise our awareness, our product, and ways in which we maintain community and connection.
To add to that, and this is just a little preview, Rachel isn't here, but Rachel is working on a Christ the King app to facilitate that kind of a connection, to disseminate information much more easily. And so that's also in the works. So we're trying our best to continue to expand our reach, but doing it in a way that's a little more technologically savvy for today.
There's some old school technology happening here that I think we should acknowledge too. Every time those bells are rung. I met a woman and her daughter last year during the Advent season, and they were here specifically because they live within earshot of the bells. And they wanted to know what was going on.
It's very good point. That old school technology, the ringing of the bells is a stewardship, is an announcement. If you may remember from the work that the consultant did in preparing for this planning process, when they took and talked to people out in the community, I think they reached 400 people, kind of people that kind of thing. What did you know? How did you know about Christ the King? Does anyone remember the two answers that they heard mostly about? The bells, and that they were across the street in hundreds.
But the bells also mean that for members who ring the bells, it's work. It's not, you don't flip an electronic switch to get some bells in them. It's work.
It is.
Like stewardship, it's work, you have to control.
It's an exercise program, right? To ring bells, there is work that is done. There's opportunity there for people that want to do that as their witness, as their service, to take and join Terry and her husband in ringing bells for our services.
Yeah, really fun.
And right, and so then you also have that. I think it's also a great opportunity, just thinking out of the box, is that, you know, there's a great music school not too far away. Students learning the craft of ringing bells, right? Doesn't always have to be around the piano and organ, but there is that in the sense of an opportunity to learn something like that. The last piece is acting justly to support others and ourselves. And in this, the way in which we walked into this strategic plan was to take and to affirm the current partnerships and ministries of Advent service that Christ the King Lutheran Church hold, took, and had. We weren't going to pick and choose. We were going to take and use this time to take and determine how we take to determine what those partnerships are. That is a litmus test, you will say, right? We've already established that in our values statement. So therefore, it is how we take and move forward and think in the future about our partnerships and ministries. That we also identified that from time to time, or just in the present, right, we have unique opportunities to take and perhaps become a part of. Doesn't necessarily mean that we are establishing that, but perhaps we have an opportunity to provide a unique role to something that addresses the social needs in Houston and what is our plan of action. So it's both things. There's an opportunity out there, and we think we might have some kind of benefit to joining that. Or that we have a unique opportunity, a unique position to take and address something, and that is what we will take and lead about it. And then our commitment to our partner, and this opens up a lot of different opportunities to address a lot of different outreach and stewardship of God's mission, is our work with St. James Phoenix. And it was a piece that we knew that we could take and build upon in terms of our sister congregation, St. James Lutheran. That was an opportunity to take and look at their outreach to their community, and that we could provide capacity building and service to that group. That we did not need to take our own flag and stick it in the ground, that this is us and this, but there are ways in which we can get involved and offer opportunities for our congregants to get involved out in the community in different kinds of things. Other thoughts? Questions? So to be faithful stewards, we are called to glorify God, serve the common good, and further God's kingdom. Worship, serve. And I think that there are I've come up with 4 principles to kind of challenge us with. It is to believe that God owns it all, everything. Our ability to amass what we have and to share and to maintain is God's. And recognizing that ownership is, I think, the first step in terms of stewardship. That's been entrusted to us. What we do with it is in glory of Him. Understand the responsibilities He's given us. Understand how we are taken to take and manage what He has entrusted to us. Maintain accountability for how we steward what He has provided. Not only in this plan, but in how we work day to day, 7 days a week, how we take and budget, how we take and have communications, talk with each other. It's all about remaining accountable for how we steward what He provides. And then finally remembering that our reward and treasure is found in and through an eternal perspective. And I say that in terms of stewardship being about the future, maintaining care, being able to take and careful, responsible management of what we're given so that we have a future. We're building always towards the future. We are becoming. Thank you for going through this journey today. Any other comments or questions that you have? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. That concludes our stewardship series. Just a couple of things to know. Next week, we're gonna have an Advent Read and Christmas making workshop. It's gonna be out in the courtyard, so we won't have a class here. But the week after that, Mr. Daniel Zorn will be leading an interactive class about the fresh. Come learn about this 800-year tradition with us. And then the week after that, on the 17th, we're having Las Posadas. We'll be running around the campus, joining Mary and Joseph. But then the last 2 weeks of December, we will not be having a forum because we'll be getting ready for Christmas and New Year's. So thank you all, and we'll see you.